Walking around the school flower garden was my absolute definition of peace. The soft afternoon breeze carried the rich scent of blooming jasmine, and for a few precious minutes, I could forget about the constant weight resting on my lungs. I reached out, gently lifting a vibrant purple flower to my nose, inhaling its delicate scent. But then, without warning, a sudden tightness clamped around my chest like an iron fist. My airway constricted, turning my breath into a thin, desperate whistle. Panic surged through me as I fumbled through my bag, searching for the small plastic cylinder that kept me alive. My fingers scraped against empty fabric. I had dropped my inhaler somewhere along the cobblestone path. As my knees buckled, I spun around in a desperate bid to retrace my steps, only to collide with a broad chest. I stumbled back, gasping for air, and looked up into the striking gray eyes of Axel. He was easily the most enigmatic, absurdly attractive guy at St. Jude Academy. He had joined our school a year ago, yet nobody knew a single real detail about his life. He sat in the back of the class, rarely spoke, and vanished the second the final bell rang. Right now, his fingers were wrapped around my blue inhaler. "Thank God," I wheezed, reaching out with trembling fingers. "Give me that, please." He didn't hand it over immediately. Instead, he shook the canister once, uncapped it with practiced ease, and held it firmly to my lip. "Press down and inhale slowly," he commanded, his voice surprisingly calm and low. I pressed down, taking 2 deep puffs of the medicine, letting the bronchodilator expand my lung. All the while, his intense gaze remained locked onto mine, studying every flicker of panic on my face. The sheer intensity of his stare made my pulse race for an entirely different reason. Embarrassed, I looked away, forcing my breathing into a steady rhythm until the tightness in my chest finally subsided. When I turned back to thank him, the space beside me was empty. He had vanished into thin air like a shadow. "My name is Olivia, and I suffer from severe chronic asthma. Because of my health, my wealthy parents kept me inside a protective bubble, forbidding me from joining active sports or participating in anything that might trigger an attack. My life was carefully monitored, perfectly safe, and completely boring. At least it was until that fateful Friday afternoon. By the weekend, I was hosting my best friend Tori on my family's private estate. We were standing near the edge of our personal golf course, lightly swinging our irons under the warm sun. I recounted every detail of what had happened in the garden the previous day, and Tori immediately stopped mid-swing, letting out a squeal that echoed across the lawn. "Oh my God, bestie," she gasped, clutching her golf club to her chest. "Maybe the mysterious lone wolf secretly harbors a deep, burning passion for you." "He was just returning something I dropped, Tori," I replied, shaking my head as I lined up my shot. "He barely speaks to anyone. Besides, he's way too mysterious for my liking. Have you heard the rumors? People say he runs an underground gang on the south side, beating up rivals and setting things on fire." Tori rolled her eyes playfully, leaning on her club. "That just makes your love story even better. I can see the online book title right now, The Mafia Boss and His Fragile Queen. It's poetic. Just stop with your outrageous fantasies." I laughed, nudging her arm. "My life isn't a dramatic teen novel." Before Tori could reply, the sharp thrum of helicopter blades cut through the sky, growing deafeningly loud. A sleek, golden-accented private chopper descended onto our family's landing pad, kicking up a storm of freshly cut grass. The doors slid open, and a tall, impeccably dressed young man stepped out into the sunlight, adjusting his designer sunglasses. It was Liam. He was my childhood best friend who had moved to Germany with his aristocratic family 5 years ago. I hadn't seen him since we were 10 years old, and he had transformed completely. He looked like something straight out of a European fashion magazine, radiating effortless wealth and supreme arrogance. "Olivia," he called out, his face lighting up with a broad smile as he strode across the lawn. He closed the distance between us and pulled me into a sweeping embrace, spinning me around before setting me back on my feet. "I missed you so much, gorgeous," he said, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "Look at you. You've grown into an absolute vision." "I missed you too, Liam," I said, genuinely glad to see my old companion. "You look completely different." Liam glanced past my shoulder, his sharp gaze landing on Tori, who was standing quietly with her golf iron. His warm smile instantly vanished, replaced by an expression of mild annoyance. "Why are you playing golf with your staff, Olivia?" He turned directly to Tori, waving a dismissive hand. "Hey maid, run inside to the kitchen and fetch me a glass of freshly squeezed orange juice. Quickly now," Tori snapped, her eyes narrowing into dangerous slits. "Do I look like your maid?" "Liam, stop it," I interjected firmly, stepping between them. "She's not my maid. This is Tori, my best friend from school. Please apologize and treat her with respect." Liam gave a casual, indifferent shrug, barely bothering to look Tori in the eye. "Whatever, I don't have time for local school drama. I need to go inside and speak with your mother. Our families have months of catching up to do." Without waiting for a response, he brushed past us and strode toward the main mansion. Tori watched his retreating back, her expression souring into deep distaste. "So that's the famous childhood best friend you've been hyping up for years?" she asked, crossing her arms tightly. "He sounds like an insufferable jerk. He's just exhausted from the long flight," I defended weakly, though a knot of unease was already tightening in my stomach. "Trust me, he was a really sweet boy when we were kids." "He isn't a sweet boy anymore, Olivia," Tori warned, looking at me with genuine concern. "He looks at people like they're disposable property. Keep your guard up around him. The following Monday morning, any hope that Liam would act like a normal human being vanished completely. When I arrived at St. Jude Academy, the entire student body was gathered around the main parking lot, creating a chaotic mob of whispers and flashing phone cameras. A massive red carpet had been rolled out from the door of the exact same golden helicopter, which was currently parked illegally across 3 faculty spots. 2 towering bodyguards in dark suits stood at attention near the walkway. Liam stepped out of the chopper, wearing a tailored navy blazer and flashing a $1 million smile to his growing fan club. Morgan, the school's notorious social climber, immediately saw her moment. She feigned a dramatic stumble over an invisible pebble, falling gracefully onto the edge of the carpet directly at Liam's feet. "Oh my good divinity, my dress," Morgan wailed, holding up the hem of her designer outfit. "It costs $23,000, and now it's ruined. I need comfort and support right now." Liam didn't even look down at her. He casually stepped over her outstretched arm, grabbed a high-powered megaphone from one of his bodyguards, and lifted it to his mouth. "Attention students of St. Jude." His voice echoed over the courtyard, sharp and grating. "Consider yourselves exceptionally fortunate. I am officially enrolling here today. And to all the ladies in the crowd, I know I am irresistible, but unfortunately for you, I am entirely taken." A collective groan rippled through the female population, Morgan looking particularly devastated as she scrambled up off the ground. Liam ignored the crowd entirely, walking straight toward me, flinging an arm over my shoulder and guiding me into the building. He made sure to sit directly beside me during morning lectures, loudly declaring his opinions on every topic and whispering intrusive questions into my ear. Yet, despite his overwhelming presence, my mind kept drifting to the empty desk in the far back corner of the classroom. Axel's desk. He hadn't showed up for morning roll call. By midday, the midterm examination rankings were posted on the brass bulletin board in the main hallway. A dense crowd had formed, and I pushed my way to the front, eager to see my name at the very top of the academic list, where it had been for the past 3 semesters. But when my eyes scanned the top spot, my stomach dropped. Rank 1, Axel Vance. I stared at the paper in absolute disbelief. "How is this even mathematically possible?" I muttered aloud to Tori, who was standing beside me. "Axel spends half the class period staring out the window and the other half absent entirely. Yet he always manages to pull top 5 scores, and now he's beat me for number 1? How does he do it? Maybe he spends his nights studying under streetlights after beating up rival gang members," Tori whispered dryly, nudging my side. I turned around quickly to respond to her ridiculous claim, but I collided straight into a tall figure standing right behind me. I stumbled backward, and strong hands instantly gripped my waist to steady me. It was Axel. His gray eyes flicked down at me, a subtle, highly infuriating smirk playing on his lip. "If you're so curious about how I study, you only have to ask, Olivia," he said smoothly. I straightened up, clearing my throat to hide my sudden nervousness. "Fine then. Tell us your grand secret. How are you suddenly topping the grade chart?" "It's an exclusive secret," he murmured, stepping half an inch closer. "I'll have to get a little nearer so the rest of the hallway doesn't steal my method." He leaned down, his face coming so close that I could feel the faint warmth of his breath against my neck. He gently brushed a stray lock of hair away from my ear, his fingers lightly grazing my skin. A sudden electric shiver shot down my spine, making my heart hammer against my rib. "I'm just really, really smart," he whispered into my ear, his voice dripping with playful arrogance. "Smarter than you for sure. I might even be smarter than Einstein himself." My cheeks flushed with heat, a mixture of intense irritation and unexpected flustered energy washing over me. I opened my mouth to push him away, but before I could process a word, a rough hand grabbed Axel by the shoulder and violently shoved him backward. "Who the hell do you think you are?" Liam snarled, stepping into the space between us, his posture stiff and aggressive. "Back away from Olivia right now." Axel didn't flinch. He adjusted his jacket with slow, deliberate precision, his expression shifting from playful mock arrogance to absolute cold indifference. "I could ask you the exact same question, buddy," Axel replied, his tone devoid of any emotion. "But honestly, I'm not interested." Without another word, Axel turned on his heel and strolled down the corridor, leaving an enraged Liam glaring after him. Liam turned back to me, his brow furrowed with possessive frustration. "What was that about? Forget about that, nobody. I booked us a private table at the best restaurant downtown tonight, so we can finally catch up properly. You're coming with me." I hesitated, wanting to refuse his commanding tone, but I remembered our years of childhood friendship and softened. "Fine," I agreed quietly. Just a casual dinner between old friends. That evening, Liam picked me up in a sleek black limousine and took us to an ultra-exclusive Michelin-starred steakhouse overlooking the river. The atmosphere was elegant, filled with low jazz music and soft candlelight. For the first 30 minutes, things went smoothly. We reminisced about our childhood games and shared memories of our family. But the moment our dinner was served, the evening took a dark turn. Liam cut into his ribeye, chewed once, and immediately slammed his heavy silver fork onto the table with a loud crash that echoed across the quiet dining room. "Hey, waiter! Get over here right now," he shouted, his voice slicing through the ambient noise. The young waiter hurried over, looking visibly pale. Is there something wrong with your meal, sir? This is an insult, Liam spat, pointing a finger at the plate. I ordered a sizzling steak, not this lukewarm trash. And look at the presentation. The meat is off-center by 2 inches. It looks hideous. Liam, stop it, I whispered hurriedly, leaning across the table, feeling a wave of deep embarrassment. The steak is completely fine. Don't cause a scene. The head chef, an older man wearing a tall white hat, hurried out from the kitchen to address the commotion. Good evening, sir. I apologize if the dish isn't to your satisfaction. I prepared it personally. It's incompetent, Liam snapped, standing up and pulling out his golden credit card, tossing it onto the table. You're fired. Get your aprons and get out of this building. The chef looked stunned and slightly bewildered. Sir, you cannot fire me. I work for the restaurant owner. My father owns the holding company that owns half this entire commercial district, Liam barked, stepping closer to the older man in a threatening manner. I will have this entire establishment shut down for health code violations by tomorrow morning. Come on, Olivia. We're leaving this pathetic dump. He grabbed my wrist to pull me toward the exit, but I yanked my hand back with all the force I could muster. Liam, you are unbelievable, I shouted, standing my ground right in the middle of the dining room. How can you possibly treat human beings like that? I treat people according to their competence, Olivia. He snapped back, his face flushing with anger. This was supposed to be a flawless date, and these low-class idiots ruined it for us. Nobody ruined anything except for you, I cried out, my voice trembling with indignation. And this wasn't a date. I told you, this was just dinner between 2 old friends. Liam let out a harsh, bitter laugh, stepping closer to invade my personal space. Friends, don't be naive, Olivia. I made it abundantly clear to every girl at school that I am unavailable because of you. Everyone expects us to end up together. Our parents want. I want it. It's the natural order of things. Well, I don't want it, I yelled back, tears of frustration pricking my eye. I don't look at you that way, Liam, and you don't get to decide my life for me. What happened to you? Where is the sweet, kind boy who used to build tree houses with me? I want my best friend back, not this arrogant monster. Liam's expression hardened into something cold, calculating, and dangerous. I'm not playing the childhood friend anymore, Olivia, he said, his voice dropping into a sinister whisper. I will do whatever it takes to make you mine. Don't try to fight me on this. A chill ran down my spine. Looking into his eyes, I realized with terrifying clarity that the boy I once loved as a brother was completely gone. The next day at school, the tension was unbearable. During the lunch hour, Tori and I sat near the outdoor courtyard, observing the surrounding crowd. Near the edge of the brick fountain, Axel was standing alone, holding his phone tightly to his ear. His quiet, relaxed demeanor was gone, replaced by a dark, intense focus as he spoke hushed, rapid words into the receiver. Look at him, Tori murmured, leaning over her tray of salad. He's definitely talking to his syndicate advisor. They're probably coordinating their next high-stakes heist or planning a mob hit. I flicked her shoulder gently, shaking my head. Stop letting your online stories brainwash you, Tori. Though I admit, he does look deeply stressed about something. My curiosity burned hotter than my caution. When Axel ended the call and walked briskly down the stone path toward the east wing, I quietly stood up and decided to follow him. I kept a safe distance, watching him navigate through the quiet corridors until he stepped into the central library. Now was my chance to see what a genius rogue actually did when he was alone. I tiptoed through the tall wooden bookshelves, peeking around the corner of the silent study hall. Axel had spread out several complex mathematical sheets across a large oak desk, but instead of studying, his head was resting flat against his arm. He was fast asleep. I crept closer on my toes, leaning over his shoulder to glance at his papers. His notes were immaculate, covered in dense differential equations written in shockingly neat, elegant handwriting. As I reached out to look closer at a peculiar symbol, a quick hand shot up and grabbed my wrist firmly. I gasped, pulling back, but his grip was solid. Axel opened his gray eyes, looking up at me without a trace of sleeping. He had been fully aware of my presence the entire time. I was just reaching for that reference book beside your papers, I stammered, my heart racing as my cheeks flushed crimson. Axel didn't let go of my wrist. Instead, he pulled my hand slightly closer, his thumb gently brushing across the back of my palm. I have an extremely crucial question for you, Olivia, he said, his tone entirely serious. It's now or never. I swallowed hard, my breath catching in my throat. What is it? What brand of lotion do you use? He asked smoothly, a tiny wicked smirk breaking across his features. Your hands are remarkably soft. Realizing he was completely playing with me, I yanked my hand free and stepped backward. I suddenly remember I have an urgent errand to run. Bye. I turned around and practically sprinted out of the library, furious at myself for letting him break my composure so easily. I hurried toward the school's central elevator to get down to the ground floor. As the metallic doors were closing, a hand blocked the sensor, and Axel stepped inside the small cabin, leaning casually against the mirrored wall. Please don't mention the library notes, I pleaded internally, staring straight at the digital floor indicator. Please don't say a word, so Axel began, his voice echoing in the enclosed space. What was your real angle with my study notes back there? Still trying to figure out how a guy who sleeps through class gets better test scores than the top student. I told you I was aiming for the textbook, I replied, crossing my arms defensively. He offered a subtle chuckle. opening his mouth to counter my lie when the elevator doors slid open once more. Liam stepped into the cabin, his eyes sweeping over the two of us, his face instantly contorted into an expression of intense disgust. "There you are, Olivia," Liam said, ignoring Axel completely. "I've been searching the campus for you. Why are you avoiding my calls? Is this still about the restaurant?" "Fine, I'll drop the charges against that pathetic chef if it makes you happy." Before I could respond, a violent jerk shook the elevator. The overhead lights flickered frantically and died out, leaving only the dim emergency LED illumination. The cabin ground to a sudden, jarring halt between the third and fourth floor. "Great," Axel muttered calmly, stepping toward the control panel and pressing the emergency call button. "The circuit is dead. The main power grid must have tripped." Panic instantly fluttered in my chest. Enclosed, tight spaces were the ultimate trigger for my condition. The air inside the small box suddenly felt heavy, hot, and suffocatingly thin. I leaned back against the handrail, my breathing turning shallow and quick as my lungs began to restrict. Liam immediately began pacing the small space, slamming his palm against the metal door. "Hey, get us out of here right now. Do you know who my family is? Fix this immediately," he turned to me, his tone aggressive and overbearing. "Olivia, stop ignoring me. Speak to him, please." "Give me space," I gasped, clutching my throat as sweat beaded on my forehead. "It's too hot, I can't breathe hot," Liam repeated, unbuttoning his jacket and ripping off his silk tie. "You're right, it's like an oven in here. Let's make it cooler then." He quickly stripped off his button-up shirt, tossing it onto the floor to flex his gym-built physique. Across the small elevator, Axel looked at Liam with absolute disdain, then turned his focus entirely to me. "Ignore him, Olivia," Axel said, his voice dropping into a calm, steady rhythm that immediately cut through my rising hysteria. "Look at me. Right here." Axel stepped directly in front of me, completely blocking Liam from my line of sight. He didn't strip for attention. Instead, he smoothly removed his dark leather jacket and dropped it down, unbuttoning his top collar just enough to stay cool while maintaining absolute composure. He placed two cool, firm hands on my shoulders, leaning down until his gray eyes locked directly onto mine. "You're having an anxiety response on top of your asthma," Axel explained clearly, his voice grounding me like an anchor in a storm. "I took advanced wilderness first aid certification last year. I need you to copy my rhythm. Inhale for 4 seconds through your nose. Hold. Exhale for 6 through your mouth. Do it with me now," he demonstrated, breathing in slowly and deep. I stared into his steady, unfrightened eyes and forced my trembling lungs to follow his count. Inhale, hold, exhale. With every cycle, the terrifying weight pressing down on my chest began to lighten, the violent panic slowly receding from my mind. "Back off from her, man," Liam shouted, grabbing Axel's shoulder to pull him away. "Don't touch my girl." Axel didn't even look back. He simply shifted his weight, locking his arm back to block Liam without breaking eye contact with me. "Keep breathing, Olivia. 4 seconds in, 6 seconds out. You're completely safe." Before Liam could escalate the altercation into a fistfight, a heavy mechanical thud echoed above us. The emergency release engaged, and the elevator doors were manually pried open by the school maintenance crew. Sunlight flooded into the dim cabin. "Oh, thank God," I whispered. Without waiting another second, I pushed past both boys, hurried straight to the main restroom, and retrieved my secondary inhaler from my locker, taking 2 deep puffs to fully restore my lung function. As I leaned against the marble sink, catching my breath, I realized something profound. In a moment of real crisis, Liam had created chaos and focused entirely on himself, while Axel had remained absolute stone, keeping me safe and tethered to reality. Later that evening, as part of my weekly personal charity routine, I had my driver park near the downtown community shelter on the south side of the city. I was distributing warm food packages and small cash donations to the local unhoused population. As I was handing a care package to an elderly woman, my eyes caught a familiar figure across the dimly lit street. It was Axel, wearing his signature black leather jacket. He was standing near a dark side alley, exchanging a small, sleek metallic package with a shady-looking guy wearing a heavy dark coat. My heart skipped a beat. Tori's warnings bounced around my head. Was he actually involved in illegal mob trade? Was the Top Student Act just a brilliant cover for a dark criminal empire? Unable to control my burning curiosity, I instructed my driver to wait and quietly followed them down the alleyway. I kept to the shadows, watching as Axel and the stranger turned a corner, descended a flight of concrete stairs, and knocked on a heavy steel door in 3 quick taps. The door creaked open, admitting them into a hidden basement room. I crept down the stairs, peering through the small, reinforced glass window built into the door frame. I braced myself to see an underground gambling ring, weapons, or stacks of illicit cash. Instead, my jaw dropped in total, speechless bewilderment. The spacious, brightly lit basement was filled with dozens of young men and women sitting at long, folding tables, but there were no weapons or illegal drugs. The entire room was filled with hundreds of insanely complex Rubik's Cubes of various shapes, sizes, and digital configurations. Triangular cubes, 12-sided megaminxes, motorized speed cubes, and complex spatial puzzles covered every flat surface. Serious-looking nerds with digital stopwatches were rapidly spinning puzzle faces at superhuman speeds, their fingers moving in a blur of pure mechanical precision. Axel walked toward the center table, completely in his element. He was clearly the undisputed king of this place. I was so stunned by the reality of the situation that my elbow accidentally banged against the steel doorframe with a loud thud. Axel's head snapped toward the window, his gray eyes meeting mine across the room. The absolute shock of seeing me at his secret lair was so intense that he lost his balance, his chair tipping backward and sending him crashing onto the floor in a flurry of plastic puzzle cube. The entire room went dead silent. Axel scrambled back to his feet, clearing his throat awkwardly and adjusting his jacket to restore his cool persona. He picked up a massive 7x7 Rubik's Cube from the floor and began solving it at lightning speed, pretend ignoring me. I couldn't help the warm, genuine smile that spread across my face. The mysterious, dangerous gangster was actually the ultimate high-stakes speed-cubing nerd. A loud bell rang, signaling the end of the final round. The head referee stepped up to a small podium, raising a microphone. And the runner-up for tonight's digital qualifier is Axel Van. Axel accepted his second-place ribbon with a deeply disappointed expression. He packed his custom cube into a padded leather case and walked out into the hallway where I was standing. I lost the championship match by precisely 5 seconds, Axel said, looking down at me with an exaggeratedly solemn pout. I lost my rhythm because I caught sight of an intruder spying through the window. It was the 57th Regional Speedcubing Championship qualifier, Olivia. I needed that win to complete my Grandmaster badge. I am so sorry, I said, stifling a laugh as I looked at his serious face. I didn't mean to ruin your grand tournament. I followed you because I thought you were involved in high-level organized crime. Before Axel could reply, a towering guy with thick glasses and a hyper-intense expression slammed the door open, charging toward Axel like an enraged bull. Vance, the guy roared, waving a stack of IOUs in the air. I placed a massive wager on you winning the regional cup tonight. You threw the match at the last second. I want my entry fee back, you loser. Get him, guys. 3 other hyper-intense speedcubing enthusiasts stepped out behind him, looking remarkably menacing for guys holding digital stopwatches. Time to make a hasty exit, Axel said smoothly. He grabbed my hand, his fingers intertwining with mine, and dragged me up the concrete stairs into the cool night air. We sprinted down the alley and hopped onto his sleek, dark vintage motorcycle parked near the curb. Toss this on, he commanded, throwing his spare helmet to me. I strapped it on quickly, wrapping my arms tightly around his waist as he kicked the engine into a roar. We shot out onto the main street, weaving through traffic as the angry speedcubers gave chase in a tuned sports car behind us. Within minutes, Axel navigated off the main highway, taking back roads that led straight out toward the quiet countryside, completely losing our pursuer. As we rode deeper into the rural roads, dark storm clouds gathered overhead, and a sudden violent downpour unleashed upon us. Rain washed over the pavement in sheets, blinding our visibility. With no major towns nearby, Axel pulled the motorcycle under the overhang of a wooden bus shelter, sitting on the edge of a grassy hill. We hopped off the bike, completely drenched to the skin. The wind whipped through the shelter, freezing cold. I shivered violently, crossing my arms to retain any shred of warmth. I am so sorry you got dragged into this madness, Axel said, running a wet hand through his dripping hair as he sat on the single bench. No, it was entirely my fault, I replied, sitting down beside him. I shouldn't have stalked you. And you lost your cubing championship because of me. It's fine, Axel murmured, a gentle smile touching his lip. There are dozens of regional tournaments every year. Besides, hearing that you thought I was an underground mafia boss makes the second place finish completely worth it. I laughed, feeling my cheeks warm up despite the cold. Can you blame me? You wear dark leather jackets, speak in cryptic sentences, drive a motorcycle, and disappear into dark alleys at night. How was I supposed to know you were leading a secret society of competitive puzzle solvers? So your theory was that all intelligent people are required to wear thick glasses, act clumsy, and avoid cool jacket? Axel teased, his voice soft and amused. It's my first time hearing that mathematical talent requires a wardrobe penalty. You're shaking, he noted suddenly, his teasing tone vanishing, replaced by genuine concern. Before I could answer, he unzipped his dark leather jacket, pulled it off, and wrapped it gently around my wet shoulders. He stepped closer, sitting right beside me on the bench, and pulled me gently against his side, wrapping his arms around me to share his body. Is this better? He asked softly near my ear. Yeah, I whispered, resting my head against his shoulder. It's really helping. Surrounded by his steady warmth, listening to the rhythmic beat of his heart against the roaring sound of the rain outside, an overwhelming sense of peace washed over me. For the first time in my life, I felt completely safe with someone who didn't view me as fragile or broken. With a soft smile, my eyes drifted shut, and I fell into a deep, dreamless sleep against his chest. When I opened my eyes again, soft morning light was filtering through the rain-washed trees. The storm had passed, leaving behind a crisp, cool morning. I realized I had slept comfortably on Axel's shoulder for hours. He was awake, looking down at me with with a look of quiet affection that made my pulse skip a beat. We quickly rode to the nearest convenience store to dry off and purchase a pair of matching basic gray hoodies to replace our soaked clothes. By the time we arrived at school together, walking side by side through the main front courtyard, the entire student body went dead silent. Liam was standing near the central fountain, talking to his bodyguard. The moment he saw us walking together, wearing matching hoodies and laughing, his face twisted into absolute fury. He marched over, shoving his way past several students, and grabbed my arm roughly. "Have you lost your mind, Olivia?" Liam demanded, his voice ringing across the courtyard. "Why are you arriving with this delinquent gangster?" "Let go of me, Liam," I snapped, yanking my arm out of his grasp with fierce irritation. "My personal life is none of your business. It is my business. We grew up together, our families have plans for us. You're throwing your dignity away for a nobody who probably can't even afford a real car." Axel unzipped his backpack with absolute calm, retrieved a folded gray undershirt I had left on his bike frame during the storm, and handed it to me. "Here, Olivia, you left your spare undershirt in my bag last night after we changed." A collective, theatrical gasp exploded across the entire courtyard. Dozens of students began whispering frantically, pulling out their phones. My face burned as hot as a fever, instantly turning into the deepest shade of red. I began coughing awkwardly to try and cover the sheer embarrassment of the moment. The sound of my cough immediately triggered both boys into action. "Back off, she needs air," Liam yelled, reaching down to grab my bag to find my medicine. "You back off, you're crowding her," Axel commanded, stepping in between Liam and my bag with lightning speed. Before they could engage in a physical fight, Morgan strutted right into the center of the conflict, tossing her hair back dramatically. "Boys, stop tearing each other apart over a sickly girl with ruined lungs," she whined, putting her hands on her hips. "Look at me. I have fully functioning organs and $1 million wardrobe. Either of you can take me out tonight." Both Axel and Liam completely ignored her, continuing to glare fiercely into each other's eyes over my head. "That is enough," I shouted, stepping between them both and grabbing my bag. "I am not some helpless trophy or a damsel in distress who needs two arrogant boys fighting over my lung. I am totally fine." Later in the library, Tori couldn't stop grinning as she leaned over my desk. "I am living for this ultimate academic drama," she whispered, her eyes sparkling with amusement. "Two insanely wealthy, ridiculously attractive guys going to war over you? It's legendary. But for the record, I am officially Team Axel. Liam is clearly the villain of this story." "Tori, I swear to God, my life is not a romance novel," I groaned, hiding my head in my hand. "It totally is, bestie," she chuckled, backing away with a teasing salute, "and the plot is thick." Over the next week, Axel and I spent nearly every afternoon together. He brought me to his secret speedcubing club, teaching me the spatial algorithms behind the complex design. One afternoon, I pointed toward a sleek, dark silver motorized cube sitting in a velvet box on his desk. I reached out to touch it, but Axel gasped, jumping forward to catch my wrist. "Careful," he warned, breathing a sigh of relief as he dusted the cube with a microfiber cloth. "You have to handle that with ultimate precision. That is a 6th generation, fully functional, limited edition magnetic speed cube. There are only 50 of them in existence worldwide." I rolled my eyes playfully, taking the cube gently from his hand. "Relax, genie. I told you I spent my entire childhood inside my house studying spatial mathematics. Watch and learn." I set the digital timer on his desk, closed my eyes for 2 seconds to map the color sequence in my mind, and let my fingers move. In less than 45 seconds, the high-tech cube clicked perfectly into place, every face presenting a solid, uniform color block. I set it back on the velvet pad with a satisfied smirk. Axel stared at the completed cube, then looked up at me, a look of genuine awe lighting up his eyes. "Brains, beauty, and speedcubing algorithms? You really are extraordinary, Olivia." Before I could respond to his sweet compliment, the wooden doors of the club room were violently kicked open. Liam stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 imposing security officers. He held a leather polo mallet over his shoulder, looking at Axel with pure, unadulterated hate. "I'm sick of your pathetic games, Vance," Liam sneered, walking into the room. "Tomorrow after school, one-on-one polo match at my family's private equestrian field. The winner gets to take Olivia out on an official date, and the loser backs off from her life permanently." "Are you out of your mind?" I yelled, jumping up from my chair, my voice trembling with rage. "I am an independent human being, not a prize to be won in some stupid medieval sport match." "I accept," Axel said calmly, standing up beside me. I turned to Axel in complete shock and anger. "Axel, are you insane? Why would you agree to his ridiculous stunt?" "It's the only way to end this, Olivia," Axel said softly, taking my hand and giving it a reassuring squeeze. "He won't stop harassing you or pulling strings behind the scenes until he is publicly defeated at his own game. I promise you I will win. I don't care about the match," I warned, looking into his eyes with deep anxiety. "I don't trust Liam to play fair. He's unhinged when he doesn't get his way. Be careful." The next afternoon, the private equestrian grounds were dead quiet under a gray, overcast sky. Tori and I sat in the grandstands as the only audience members. Down on the manicured grass field, Axel and Liam were mounted on 2 powerful polo horses, holding their mallets at the ready. The match began, and within minutes, it was painfully clear that Axel was the superior athlete. Despite Liam's years of high-end European coaching, Axel maneuvered his horse with effortless precision, intercepting every shot, gliding past Liam's defense, and scoring 3 consecutive goals with absolute ease. Liam's face turned bright red with embarrassment and rage. As they neared the 4th round near the far boundary line, Axel sprinted ahead to take the winning shot. Realizing he was about to suffer a humiliating public defeat, Liam's eyes filled with malice. Instead of aiming for the ball, Liam swung his heavy wooden mallet sideways with brutal force, striking Axel's horse violently across its front leg. The horse let out a terrified, pained whinny, rearing up wildly and throwing Axel from the saddle. Axel crashed hard onto the turf, rolling several yards before coming to a stop, clutching his shoulder in pain. Liam didn't even check on the horse or Axel. He casually tapped the ball into the open goal, raised his mallet in victory, and trotted his horse directly toward the grandstand where I was sitting. "You're mine now, Olivia," Liam called out, offering a cold, triumphant smirk. "Whether you like it or not, I won the match." "Over my dead body, Liam," I screamed, tears of pure fury streaming down my face as I rushed down the steps toward the field. "You're not my childhood friend. You're a cold, cheating monster." Axel pushed himself up off the grass, wincing as he held his injured shoulder. He glared at Liam with absolute disdain. "You cheated, Liam. You struck a defenseless animal to force a fall. That match is completely invalid. We never agreed on official rules, loser." Liam sneered down from his horse. "A win is a win." Driven by righteous fury, Axel lunged forward, grabbing Liam by his riding jacket to pull him down. But before Axel could strike, Liam snapped his fingers twice. His 2 massive personal bodyguards rushed out from the side stables, grabbing Axel's arms and forcibly pinning him to the ground. "Do you really think this psychotic behavior is helping you win me over?" I spat, standing right in front of Liam, my voice trembling with hatred. "You are making me despise you more with every passing second. What do you think your family would say if they knew their sweet, fragile daughter was running around with a low-class street racer who gets into violent altercations?" Liam countered, his voice dripping with venom. "Where's your proof that he's anything special? He's nothing compared to my legacy. He is 10 times the man you will ever be." I screamed back. "He's brilliant, decent, and honest. I care about him, Liam. I will never ever care about you." "Finally you admit it," Liam whispered, his eyes narrowing into dark, sinister slits. "We'll see how long your little romance lasts." The following morning, I arrived at St. Jude Academy to find absolute chaos. The grand marble entrance hall was completely vandalized. Violent spray-painted slogans covered the historical portraits, glass display cases were shattered, and half the student lockers had been smashed open with heavy iron tools. The principal was fuming with rage in his office, surrounded by several school board members. Liam was standing near the desk, pointing toward the security monitor. "Look at the footage, Principal," Liam said smoothly, a fake tone of deep disappointment in his voice. "The evidence is entirely absolute." I pushed my way into the office alongside Tor. On the high-definition surveillance screen, a tall figure clad in a signature black leather jacket, with dark hair styled identically to Axel's, could be seen walking through the dark hallways at 2 a.m., swinging a crowbar and smashing property. The figure's face was kept partially shadowed, but the jacket, height, and movement matched Axel perfectly. "I knew it!" Morgan chimed in dramatically from the doorway, clinging to Liam's arm. "Axel is an unhinged thug. He threw a violent tantrum because Liam beat him in polo yesterday. He could have destroyed my luxury locker instead, the absolute savage." "Morgan, shut up and go buy a brain," Tori snapped, stepping forward to analyze the screen. "Look at that camera footage, Principal. It's shot from a weird low-resolution backup angle, and the face is completely obscure. Anyone could wear a dark leather jacket and pretend to walk like that. It doesn't matter." Liam's wealthy father, who was standing beside the principal, declared loudly, "My family has just pledged a $5 million endowment for the new library wing. If this violent hoodlum isn't suspended immediately and removed from campus, we will pull all our funding and sue the school board." Under immense financial pressure, the principal caved instantly. "Axel Vance, you are officially suspended pending a full disciplinary review. Leave the premises immediately." Axel, who was standing quietly near the back of the room, didn't argue. He looked at the principal, then turned his gaze to me. "Olivia," he said softly, his voice steady amidst the chaos. "You know I didn't do this." "I know," I said firmly, walking over to stand directly by his side, glaring at Liam. "Only total idiots and corrupt cowards would believe this cheap setup." Liam gave me a subtle, victorious smirk from across the desk as Axel was escorted off campus by security guard. My blood boiled with white-hot rage. I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that Liam had framed Axel, but to save Axel's future, I needed irrefutable proof. That night, Tori and I launched a dangerous undercover operation. Tori used her knowledge of the estate's layout to create a clever tactical distraction near the front gates, faking an accidental fender bender with Liam's family security vehicles to draw the guards away from the West Wing. Meanwhile, I quietly navigated around the back perimeter of Liam's massive mansion, using the thick ivy vines on the stone wall to climb up to his second-floor balcony. The balcony door was unlocked, and I slipped quietly into his dark, luxurious bedroom, hiding inside the spacious walk-in mahogany closet. 10 minutes later, the bedroom door opened. Liam walked inside, accompanied by a tall young man who was wearing the exact dark leather jacket from the CCTV footage. The guy was casually tossing a dark prop wig onto the desk. "That was too easy," the stunt guy chuckled, leaning against the bed frame. "The high school board didn't even ask for a secondary facial analysis. You paid me $3,000 just to walk past a low-res camera in a dark jacket." "It was worth every single penny," Liam sneered, pouring himself a drink. "That pathetic nobody is suspended. His academic record is ruined. And once his expulsion goes through, Olivia will have no choice but to rely on me again. She belongs to me." Inside the dark closet, my hands shook with fury as I held up my smartphone through the slatted wooden door, recording every single word and angle of their conversation in crystal-clear 4K video. I had him completely trapped. But as I pulled my phone back to save the file, my shoe accidentally caught on a heavy metal shoe rack sitting near the floor. A loud metallic crash echoed across the quiet bedroom. The room went dead silent. "Who's in there?" Liam barked. Before I could react, the closet doors were violently yanked open. Liam stood there, his eyes widening in complete shock, which instantly morphed into unhinged rage when he saw the recording active on my screen. "You crazy little witch!" Liam roared, reaching out with clawed fingers to snatch the phone from my hands. "Give me that phone right now." "No," I yelled, dodging his reach and holding the phone tightly to my chest. "You are insane, Liam." He lunged forward, grabbing my shoulders forcefully and slamming me back against the closet wall. "Give it to me," he screamed, his eyes wildly bloodshot as he tried to pry my fingers open. "Help," I screamed at the top of my lungs. "Help me." The bedroom door was thrown open with a heavy thud. Liam's parents, accompanied by 2 head estate guards and Torihu, had rushed inside after hearing my scream barged into the room. "Liam, what on earth are you doing?" his father roared, pulling his violent son away from me. I stumbled forward, catching my breath as Tori ran to my side, supporting me. I held out my phone, pressing play on the recorded video, letting the clear footage of Liam bragging about paying off the stunt double echo loudly across the room. His parents listened to their son's taped confession in utter, horrified silence. His mother covered her mouth in absolute shame, while his father's face turned pale with utter disgust. "Is this true, Liam?" his father asked, his voice shaking with intense rage. "You committed fraud, destruction of property, and assault just to ruin another student's life?" "Father, please, it was for Olivia. She was being misled by a street thug," Liam pleaded, his arrogant facade crumbling into pathetic desperation. "Silence," his father barked, turning to the estate guard. "Call the local police department immediately. Turn this stunt double over for questioning and provide full restitution to St. Jude Academy for all damages." His father turned back to Liam, his eyes cold and unyielding. "You have completely disgraced our family name. Your allowance is revoked entirely. Your trust fund is frozen, and you are being placed on the first private transport back to a strict boarding school in Germany tomorrow morning. You will answer for these criminal acts. You'll regret this, Olivia." Liam screamed as the guards escorted him out of the room, his voice fading down the hallway. "You'll regret choosing him over me." I sank down onto the edge of the bed, letting out a long, exhausted sigh. A profound sense of relief washed over me. The toxic shadow that had haunted my life for weeks was finally gone for good. The next morning, the school board officially dropped all charges against Axel, issuing a full public apology and reinstating his top academic rank. But when I went to look for him at his usual spot in the courtyard, he wasn't there. He wasn't in the library, and he wasn't at his speed cubing club room either. I tried calling his phone, but the signal went straight to voicemail. Panic fluttered in my stomach. What if he had decided to leave school entirely after the public humbug? What if he was gone? Anxious thoughts flooded my mind, causing my breathing to turn ragged and shallow. I hurried down the quiet East Wing corridor toward the school's grand art studio, searching every room. My chest tightened severely, my airway constricting under the weight of sudden panic. I reached frantically into my bag, searching for my inhaler, but my trembling fingers found nothing. I had dropped it again in my state of distress. "Looking for this?" A smooth, deeply familiar voice called out from the back of the sunlit art room. I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. Axel was standing near a massive easel, holding my blue inhaler in his right hand, a soft, gentle smile resting on his face. I ran across the room, ignoring my wheezing breath, and threw my arms around his neck, pulling him into a tight embrace. Tears of absolute relief welled up in my eyes. "I thought something terrible had happened to you. I thought you left." "I'm sorry for scaring you, Olivia," Axel whispered, wrapping his arms securely around my waist and lifting me slightly off my feet. "I got completely absorbed in finishing a personal project for you." He gently set me down, handed me my inhaler, and stepped back, gesturing toward the back wall of the spacious art room. I took 2 quick puffs of my medicine, calmed my breathing, and looked at what he was pointing toward. My breath hitched in my throat, completely taken away for an entirely different reason. Dominating the center of the room was a breathtaking, massive 6-foot mosaic installation. It wasn't painted with acrylics or oils. The entire portrait was constructed out of over 2,000 individual, fully functional Rubik's Cubes, meticulously rotated to specific color faces to form a stunning, hyper-realistic mosaic of my face. The sunlight pouring through the high arched windows illuminated the brilliant colors, making my eyes in the mosaic shine with mesmerizing warmth. "Axel," I whispered, stepping closer to touch the intricate pattern in absolute disbelief. "This is the most incredible thing I have ever seen. How long did this take you?" "I've been working on it every night since the day I met you in the flower garden," Axel said softly, stepping up beside me. He turned me around gently, taking both of my hands into his. "Olivia, I've liked you from the very first second I saw you standing in that garden, holding that purple flower. I was terrified of getting close to you at first because I knew I would fall completely helpless in love with you. And well, I did. I love you, Olivia." A radiant, beautiful smile spread across my face, washing away every shred of fear and doubt I had ever carried. "What took you so long to say it?" I asked softly. Axel didn't answer with words. He leaned down, placing one hand gently against my cheek, and brought his lips down to mine in a slow, breathtaking kiss. It felt completely surreal, like the entire world had faded away, leaving only the two of us surrounded by light and color. "I love you too, Axel," I whispered against his lips as we pulled back. Suddenly, the wooden doors of the art room burst open. Corey popped her head inside, holding her phone up and squealing at the top of her lungs. "I knew it. I knew the mafia boss and the queen would end up together. Bestie, this is the ultimate chapter." Axel and I looked at each other, letting out a bright, shared laugh that echoed through the sunlit art room, knowing that our real story was finally just beginning. It all started in the living room of our big, fancy suburban house. Let me introduce myself first. I am Lex, a teenager who is totally obsessed with motorcycles, speed, and a bit of trouble. That morning, I was stuck sitting on the sofa, sandwiched right between my parents while a heavy, itchy cast wrapped all the way up my right leg. My mom was pacing up and down, scolding me furiously. I looked down at my cast, wondering how long this lecture was going to take, thinking they were supposed to be taking care of me, not torturing me. Suddenly, my mom stopped and yelled that starting that very day, she was locking my phone and my laptop away. Losing my screens meant total isolation, but luckily my dad jumped in, telling her she was being too cruel and asking if a broken leg was not enough punishment. Of course, that only made things worse. My mom snapped, shouting that he did not deserve to have a say in this at all. She screamed that if he hadn't bought me that death trap of a motorbike, I would still be completely fine. My dad scoffed, sarcastically apologizing for making sure his daughter didn't grow up to be completely boring like her mother. I just sat there helplessly as the familiar spectacle unfolded. Another lecture about my irresponsibility had quickly turned into a bitter quarrel between the two of them instead. They only stopped when my mom checked the time and realized she needed to leave for her business trip to Egypt. She announced she was done arguing because she had a flight to catch, then warned me that she would have her eyes on me the entire time. I rolled my eyes, asking sarcastically how she was going to do that all the way from Egypt, because it sounded pretty hard to me. She gave me one last stern look and stormed out. As the house went quiet, I took comfort in thinking that at least my dad was still here, so I wouldn't be completely by myself. The next morning, I limped down to the kitchen, smelling the faint scent of yesterday's leftover coffee. I froze when I saw a white note stuck to the shiny fridge door from my dad. He wrote that he was shooting his new movie in Spain for a few months, and that there was a strict no-phone policy to avoid leaks, so I shouldn't call unless it was an absolute emergency. I stared at the paper, feeling a cold knot in my stomach. Seriously? Choosing work over me again? That is exactly what you get when you have a world-famous actor for a dad and an award-winning photographer for a mom. They are rarely home, and whenever they actually are, they are constantly at each other's throat. Their absence was the whole reason I started hanging out with my biker gang. Motorcycles were my only true escape, but that passion was also exactly how I messed up my leg. I leaned against the counter, remembering the painful day of my accident. I could still picture myself sprawled on the hard, dusty ground with my heavy bike lying right beside me, while the other gang members just stood around staring. In my own defense, I knew I could totally nail that stunt and win their stupid bet if it wasn't for that unexpected bumpy patch on the road. What really hurt, though, was that not a single one of my so-called homies had checked on me since that day. Not even my boyfriend Blake had sent a single text. By afternoon, I was sitting up in my second-floor bedroom, looking out of my gigantic window. It was the start of summer vacation, yet I could hardly move an inch, which was incredibly frustrating. Bored out of my mind, I decided to entertain myself by playing a game of candid camera on our whole quiet suburbia. I grabbed my mom's professional camera with its massive lens, feeling the cold weight of the metal in my hand. Peering through the viewfinder, I easily spied on the newlyweds Cunninghams on my right, the Carpenters on my left, and then I focused across the street on my childhood friend, Tiny Timmy. When the lens zoomed into his bedroom, my jaw dropped. Tim was working out on his bench press, his bare skin covered in glistening sweat. I honestly thought some random hunky guy had just moved into the neighborhood. Tiny Timmy had officially grown into Timothy. He was suddenly tall, had a perfect six-pack, and beautiful wavy curly hair, looking just like a muscular version of Timothée Chalamet. I let out a dreamy sigh, but right then, Tim suddenly sat up and looked straight toward my window. We made direct eye contact, and my heart skipped a beat in pure awkwardness. Thinking fast, I grabbed a thick notebook, wrote in big letters that he was looking good, handsome, and held it up against the glass. Through my camera lens, I saw him read it and flash a warm, beautiful smile. Then he started writing something back. I giggled and squinted my eyes to read his paper, which said that he looked even better up close. I felt my cheeks get hot and quickly fanned myself, thinking that was incredibly bold of him. I wanted to tease him back, so I held up another page saying his reply was sorry but lame. Tim looked confused for a second, so I pointed down at the heavy cast on my leg. The moment he saw it, his eyes went wide with surprise, and he instantly turned around and dashed out of his room. I sighed, muttering to myself that a broken leg was enough to scare him off, and that he was the one who was truly lame. Suddenly, the loud sound of the doorbell echoed through the house. I struggled down the stairs, and when I pulled the heavy front door open, Tim was standing right there on the porch, breathing a bit heavily. He grinned and told me that it took a while. My eyes widened in shock as I asked him what he was doing here. He chuckled, explaining that of course he came, because I obviously needed a closer look, and it looked like I could use a hand or maybe a leg. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. In a playful, high-pitched voice, I told him to come inside and help a poor damsel in distress, striking a dramatic, helpless pose that made him burst out laughing. From that afternoon on, Tim came over to my house every single day to help me out with everything. He was incredibly sweet, even trying to ride my motorcycle around the block so the engine wouldn't sit idle for too long, though I couldn't help but giggle watching him struggle with the heavy machine. Besides his new bulked-up body, he was still the exact same goofy friend I knew back in the day. We spent hours laughing, playing fast-paced video games, and watching movies together in the living room. During one of our movie nights, we were scrolling through a streaming app on the television when I saw a title I loved. I pointed at the screen and told him he absolutely had to watch Bodies because the plot was completely nuts. Tim smiled and countered, saying he actually thought I might be into Lady Bird because it was such a heartwarming coming-of-age story. I twisted my face in pure disgust, groaning out an absolute no way. Tim just smirked and told me that Timothée Chalamet was in it. A massive smile broke across my face, and I immediately agreed, saying I was totally sold. But then I asked him how on earth he knew that would sway my opinion so easily. Tim looked at me knowingly, stating that he just knew me, just like he knew that I spied on him from time to time, which he jokingly added was super creepy. I just smiled cheekily, thinking to myself that he was a totally shy guy who intentionally left his bedroom blinds wide open while working out anyway. One morning, Tim and I were hanging out in my living room. He was on the floor doing push-ups, and I was casually sitting on his back to add weight. Suddenly, the front door burst open, and my boyfriend Blake marched in with his eyes glued to his phone. He was loudly shouting about a racing tournament in the Upper West Side, but when he finally looked up, his jaw dropped. Seeing me on another guy's back made him furious, and he demanded to know what was going on. I stayed completely unbothered, slid off Tim's back, and casually introduced them. Blake angrily stepped toward Tim, demanding to know what he thought he was doing. I quickly told Blake to watch his tongue, reminding him that he had ignored me for weeks, and didn't even remember that I had a broken leg. Blake stammered, but then defensively yelled that I belonged to him anyway. Fuming like a bull, he raised his fist to punch Tim, but his hand was stopped dead in midair. Tim had caught Blake's fist with a rock-solid, emotionless grip. The moment Tim let go, a defeated Blake turned around and fled. I scoffed at what a coward he was and apologized to Tim, who was surprisingly cool about it. He asked how Blake and I had even become a thing. I explained sarcastically that I used to think he was cool because he led a biker gang, but I never expected it to last, just like my parents' marriage. Tim's face fell, and he sadly shared that his own dad had left his mom for another woman last year. Hearing that, I felt a wave of sympathy, thinking that being stuck at home wasn't so bad since we could catch up on real things. The next morning, however, a flash of blonde hair across the street caught my eye. I grabbed my camera and zoomed in on Tim's yard. It was a girl named Annabelle returning a hoodie to him. I felt a sharp pang of annoyance. She was giggling uncontrollably, tossing her hair, and purposefully touching his arm while he just stood there. That evening, the moment Tim walked into my bedroom, I demandingly asked who the blonde was and what she was doing at his place. Tim looked totally surprised and asked who I meant. I snapped that she might look like strawberry shortcake, but he shouldn't be fooled because whatever love they thought they had would soon turn sour. Tim just burst out laughing, wiping away a tear. When I angrily asked what was so funny, He asked what made me think that way when I didn't even know her. I told him to see the truth for himself, grabbed my camera, and showed him the neighborhood secrets I'd uncovered. I pointed out that the couple at number 9 were both having an affair. The daughter at number 11 was using her boyfriend to hide her relationship with a girl, and the seemingly perfect Carpenters were miserable because of the husband's drinking. I triumphantly concluded that there was no such thing as real love. Tim nodded but smiled softly, saying that genuine love did exist. He gently aimed the camera toward the Cunninghams, showing them cuddled up by candlelight, feeding each other popcorn. I narrowed my eyes suspiciously, still not buying their perfect act. A few afternoons later, Tim told me he had to work overtime at the library to prepare for an event with, you guessed it, nobody else but Annabelle. A hot surge of jealousy hit me, but I forced myself to hide my anger as I watched him drive off with that blonde Barb. Feeling completely restless, I decided to peek through my camera at the Cunningham. It was so annoying seeing them look so lovey-dovey, happily reading a book together. I tried to take my mind off Tim, but the more I stared, the more I imagined that the couple in my lens was Tim and Annabelle. Frustrated, I slammed the camera down. That was when my eyes landed on a library book Tim had borrowed from me. A little smirk crept onto my face as I realized it was the perfect excuse to follow him. By evening, I took an Uber to the library. Limping inside, I paused in utter confusion because the place was packed with people. I wondered why Tim had claimed they would be entirely alone. Suddenly, I spotted him, and the moment he saw me, his face twisted into an expression of pure shock, like that famous painting, The Scream. I cheerfully announced that he shouldn't mind me because I was just there to return my book. Tim frowned, looking stressed, and muttered that I should have just given it to him. I let out a sarcastic chuckle, saying I could clearly see he was way too busy with Annabelle. Annabelle blinked, asking how I knew her name. I coldly replied that she simply reminded me of that creepy horror doll who was also an absolute nightmare. As she gasped in shock, Tim immediately grabbed my arm and dragged me away. I secretly smirked, loving that he chose to focus on me instead of her. However, our fun was cut short the second we stepped outside. Blake was standing right there on the sidewalk, glaring at Tim and darkly announcing that it was time for him to pay. Tim didn't hesitate. He immediately stepped in front of me to shield my body. But Blake just smirked and let out a loud, sharp whistle, signaling for a whole group of his biker goons to step out from the shadows. Outnumbered, I panicked and pleaded with Blake to be civilized so we could sort this out without violence. Blake chuckled, proposing that we settle the entire thing with a bet instead. He explained that whoever could pull off the exact motorcycle trick that broke my leg, topped off with an Akira slide, would win me fair and square. I snapped at him, yelling that I was not some trophy and that the stunt was incredibly dangerous. I turned to Tim for backup, but Tim just stared at Blake and calmly said it sounded worth it to him. I screamed, asking if both of them had lost their mind. Tim went first. He flunked the landing but miraculously rolled away without a scratch. Blake went next, but he completely lost control and landed flat on his face. It was such an embarrassing fiasco that the rest of the gang quickly roared away into the night. Even though we were safe, I was boiling with rage. I marched up to Tim, sarcastically congratulating him on winning absolutely nothing. Then I turned my back and stormed off to call a ride, leaving a confused Tim behind. It wasn't that I didn't care about him, I just couldn't stand his foolish recklessness anymore. The next morning, the loud ringing of the doorbell woke me up. I limped downstairs, opened the door, and found Tim standing there looking nervous. In an annoyed voice, I asked him what he was here for. Tim stammered, apologizing for the night before. He explained that if I had stayed longer, he could have told me that he did what he did because he liked me in a romantic way. He admitted he couldn't remember when it started, but he remembered how sad he was when we stopped hanging out. And he even started working out just to impress me. My mind went totally blank. It turned out nothing was going on between him and Annabelle. They were just co-workers, and he had invented the story about being alone at the library just to see my reaction. Tim looked at me expectantly, asking what I thought and promising he could make me believe in love. I shook my head, telling him not to be ridiculous because love wasn't like the movie, but just a temporary chemical reaction in the brain. Tim pleaded with me to just give it a chance. I refused, telling him to look at my parents, his father, and all the broken families in our neighborhood. I told him his feelings would fade, just like mine did with Blake. Tim's voice broke as he apologized for wasting my time, saying he thought he was special enough for me to take a leap of faith, but now he knew he was wrong. He left without another word, and when I saw his bedroom blinds close across the street, a sharp sting hit my chest. Late that afternoon, I sat on my front doorsteps, feeling completely uneasy without him. I wanted to make it up, but I didn't know how. My chest tightened even more when I saw him talking to Annabelle outside his house, looking happy and smiling. By evening, I was back at my bedroom window, feeling miserable. I kept telling myself love wasn't real, and that the perfect Cunninghams were just faking. I picked up my camera to spy on them, but suddenly I saw a huge fight break out. The husband punched the wall in a rage and pushed his wife out of view. Then a massive commotion echoed across the yard, glass smashing and furniture crashing noises. Panicked, I called the cops right away. After hanging up, a twisted sense of victory hit me. Their marriage really was a sham. I excitedly limped across the street, dragged Tim over to the Cunninghams' front lawn, and waited. But when the cops arrived, the couple answered the door perfectly fine. It turned out they knew I was spying on them and staged the whole violent fight as a prank to teach me a lesson. They wrapped their arms around each other and laughed at me while the entire neighborhood gathered to watch. I facepalmed in total humiliation, but the absolute worst part was seeing the pure disappointment on Tim's face. He looked at me and told me I had to stop being so stubborn because not every family was like mine. I stood there with a deeply guilty expression, unable to say a single word, even when the cops gave me a stern warning. That night, I tossed and turned in my bed as Tim's words about taking a leap of faith kept wiggling around my mind. Suddenly, a flashing light across the street caught my attention. I sat up, grabbed my camera, and saw several dark shadows with flashlights creeping around Tim's house. My heart jumped into my throat. I tried calling Tim, but he was fast asleep. Calling the cops was completely useless too, because the dispatcher just yelled at me, thinking I was pulling another prank. Panicked, I decided to handle it myself. I grabbed an air horn, gripped my crutch, and limped across the street as fast as I could. Standing on Tim's front lawn, my heart was beating like crazy. I screamed at the top of my lungs that there were thieves. The startled intruders whipped around, so I blared the air horn and yelled at them to freeze and put their hands over their head. But being a teenager with a massive leg cast, I never actually expected criminals to just stand still. They rushed forward and tackled me to the ground. Just when I thought my life was over, Tim's voice shattered the darkness, screaming at them to get away from me. Thank goodness he woke up. Other neighbors rushed out to help hold the thieves down, and Tim's mom, Mrs. Jones, quickly helped me up. Tim called the cops, and this time they arrived immediately. Phew, the whole thing was absolutely insane. After things settled down, we went into Tim's living room. Mrs. Jones thanked me and invited me to stay the night. She burst out laughing uncontrollably when I awkwardly explained the fake fight situation with the Cunninghams, leaving me embarrassed and Tim completely mortified. When Tim went to grab us some drinks, his mom gently asked why I was all alone in this condition. I opened up and spilled everything about my broken family. Her expression turned into deep sympathy. She shared that love didn't always have a happy ending, but that didn't mean it wasn't real. She smiled softly, explaining that she and Tim's dad used to have genuine feelings, but things simply changed over time. She added that she wouldn't change a thing, because that relationship gave her Tim, the second real love of her life. Her words hit me completely differently, making me realize I had given love a bad name. I admitted she was right, and that love itself was not at fault. I told her Tim was lucky to have her, whereas my parents just bickered and put all their anger on me, adding that I bet even tonight's incident wouldn't make them care. Mrs. Jones gently stroked my hair, suggesting I give it a try anyway because their reactions might surprise me. So I called them. Guess what? They both sounded completely terrified and concerned, promising to come home as soon as possible. Mrs. Jones smiled warmly, saying everything was going to be all right now, and asked Timmy to show me where I'll be sleeping. Tim led me to the guest room and started setting up a spare mattress. He remarked that what I did out there was really brave, especially considering my leg situation. I hesitated for a second, looking down at my feet, and quietly told him I wouldn't have risked my life if it wasn't for a specific reason. Tim smiled cheekily, saying he was all ears. I looked into his eyes and confessed I did it for him. I told him I was sorry for overreacting, explaining that the thought of us becoming a bitter old couple had bugged me, but I realized we could be happy like the Cunninghams instead. I looked at him expectantly, asking if that sounded too bad. Tim smiled sweetly, murmuring that he guessed not, and pulled me into a warm embrace. The next morning, the bright summer sun filtered through the guest room window, and I woke up to my parents' call. They actually kept their promise this time. Within an hour, both my mom and dad arrived at Tim's house to pick me up, and we all walked back home together. As we walked, my mom softly explained that she had genuinely thought my dad was staying home to take care of me, while my dad admitted he had absent-mindedly assumed my mom only left for Egypt in a fit of anger and was going to return in a couple of days. Hearing this, a weight lifted off my chest. I realized that they really did care about me. They just had a completely terrible way of showing. They had forced themselves to stay together all these years, thinking it was what was best for me. But the unending tension and bitter bickering had just been eating us all up from the inside. Thankfully, this crazy incident finally opened their eyes, and they calmly agreed to get a peaceful divorce while still looking after me together as a team. A few weeks later, I was finally free from that heavy leg cast, but honestly, I felt even more liberated on the inside than on the outside. Tim and I went out for a ride, and as the engine roared, he drove my motorcycle smoothly down the open road while I sat closely behind him, wrapping my arms tightly around his waist as we headed straight into the beautiful sunset. The warm wind hit my face, and I couldn't help but wonder if this feeling was the power of my newfound belief in love, or if it was because I finally realized that love had actually been around me all along. I am still not entirely sure myself, but honestly, who cares? Alex and Timothy, signing off.